Good afternoon to you. Good to have you with us. It's 306 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news coming up this hour at 3:30 from the Trump campaign. We'll talk to Lynn Patton. She'll join us again. Get an update on the state of the race as Donald Trump's primary opponent, Nikki Haley, makes a big announcement today. Big air quotes right now. Scott Pressler will be with us at 4 o'clock. Talk to him about the early vote and what can be done for Republicans to actually win this year. Azra Nomani joins us today at 4:30 on the breaking news that the United States Supreme Court is declining to hear the case involving the racist admissions policy now at TJ High School in Virginia. We'll get into the details there. And then Mike Benz is here at 5:30. You know about this Mike Benz? He's an executive director of the Foundation for Freedom Online, a former State Department diplomat. He just did a massive interview with Tucker Carlson this past week with granular detail about the censorship industry and the way that it is crushing all of us and our ability to speak freely. Mike Benz joins us right here on the program coming up at 5:30. Can't wait for that conversation. And we'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I want to start with as is often the case here on WMAL, so many national stories, local stories are one and the same. And today, that's the case when it comes to Thomas Jefferson High School in Virginia. TJ has been known as the #1 high school in the entire country. And when the left gets a hold of something that's that great, you can be sure that their plan is to ruin it. And that has been the plan for Thomas Jefferson High School. In fact, a couple years back, the left-wing Fairfax County School Board decided that they were going to stop admitting students on the basis of merit and instead do it on the basis of race. They were upset with the racial composition of the school. Now, if you're not familiar with the details of this story, you're probably thinking, that's insane. If you are familiar with the details of this story, I know you're thinking, yeah, that was insane. Yes, it was insane, and it was racist. And in fact, a coalition of parents got together that included our guest Azra Nomani coming up at 4:30, and they filed a complaint. They said, this is racist. This is insane. And a court took a look at it and said, yeah, it does look racist, in fact. There was plenty of documentation from school officials saying they were trying to decrease the number of Asian American students in the school and elevate the number of Black and Hispanic students in the school, a specific racial goal. So one court says, yes, racist. It goes up for appeal. The reaction there, a split decision. But 2 judges on a 3-judge panel saying, not racist. You can meddle in this way. It's totally fine. In fact, the Asian Americans are still overrepresented at the school, even though their numbers went down after this racist policy. So therefore, it can be done. And that brought us to the United States Supreme Court. These parents appealing to the Supreme Court. And today we get the news that the United States Supreme Court is declining to review this case. Now, that's a tragedy. That's a tragedy that they would decline to review this case. Here's how the Washington Post is describing it this afternoon. The Supreme Court will not review a challenge to the admissions system for a prestigious Northern Virginia magnet school, Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, which administrators said opened the program to a wider socioeconomic range of students. But opponents claim discriminated against Asian American applicants. The High Court's decision Tuesday not to take the case drew a sharp dissent from 2 conservatives. Now, you want to guess who the conservatives were? Who are the 2 conservatives who were going to give a written dissent? If you said Alito and Thomas, well, you're right. Those are the 2, as expected. Where is everyone else? Why is it just Alito and Thomas who are signing on to this big dissent? And it's a sharp one, as they point out. It's a tough one, and it's a smart one, as expected. This follows the court's ruling last term rejecting race-conscious admissions programs at Harvard and the University of North Carolina. That historic decision rolled back decades of precedent, racist precedent, and has dramatically changed how the nation's private and public universities select their students. The legal battle in Virginia is between a group of parents called the Coalition for TJ, that would be co-founded by Azra Nomani, coming up again here at 4:30, and the Fairfax County School Board over an admissions policy designed to encourage diversity, the Washington Post says, which is a euphemism for enact racial prejudice in the selection of students. They want to encourage diversity at the school without explicitly considering race. Thomas Jefferson, often ranked the best high school in the country, changed its admissions process in 2020 in part to boost racial diversity at the school, which had long enrolled single-digit percentages of Black and Hispanic students. So in 2020, they changed the admissions process. And since then, they were able to successfully decrease the number of Asian American students who have gained admission to the school. Also, one of the things that the left won't tell you very much about, in the process of decreasing Asian American students, they also lifted the number of white students who now go to TJ. Did you know that? Yeah, that was the effect of all of this. So Alito and our friend Clarence Thomas, I say like I know him, I don't know, but he's a great man. Justice Clarence Thomas, Justice Alito, the two of them, they get together, and Alito authoring this dissent today. And this is what he writes. I want to read, I'm going to try and quote somewhat prolifically from this because it's fantastic. The Court of Appeals decision in this case is based on a patently incorrect and dangerous understanding of what a plaintiff must show to prove intentional race discrimination. A group representing applicants for admission to a highly competitive public magnet school brought suit claiming that changes in the school's admissions requirements violated the Equal Protection Clause. They alleged that the changes were made for the purpose of discriminating on the basis of race to the detriment of Asian American applicants. The district court found that direct and circumstantial evidence supported that claim and issued an injunction against implementation of the changes. All right, that's the first court, the district court. They say this is racist. On appeal, however, a divided Fourth Circuit panel reversed and held that the plaintiff's claim failed simply because the challenged changes did not reduce the percentage of Asian American admittees below the percentage of Asian American students in the schools in the jurisdictions served by the magnet school. What the Fourth Circuit majority held, in essence, is that intentional racial discrimination is constitutional, so long as it is not too severe. This reasoning is indefensible, and it cries out for correction. That's Alito writing there. So you hear what they're alleging here, what the court held, the Fourth Circuit held in the appeal was, well, there's still a ton of Asian American students who are getting into TJ, so it's not really racial discrimination, is it? You know, they're over 50% still, so it's not racial discrimination. Well, the school intentionally targeted them on the basis of their race. And Alito and Thomas emphasized that today. They say in 2019, Asian Americans constituted 71.5% of TJ's class. And the 2020 entering class was similar, with a 73% Asian American student body. They say Asian American students, many of whom are immigrants or the children of immigrants, have often seen admission to TJ as a ticket to the American dream. In this respect, their aspirations mirror those of young people from other immigrant groups. Public magnet schools with competitive admissions based on standardized tests have served as engines of social mobility by providing unique opportunities for minorities and the children of immigrants. And these students' subsequent careers have in turn richly contributed to our country's success. For example, one such school in New York City has produced no fewer than 9 Nobel laureates. While Asian Americans have striven to attend TJ, their strong representation in the student body attracted criticism from education officials. In June of 2020, okay, now this is where the justices begin laying out the evidence here. This is explicit racist behavior on the part of the school system in Fairfax. They say in June of 2020, TJ students received an email. The students received an email from their principal lamenting that the school, quote, did not reflect the racial composition in Fairfax County Public Schools. What? The principal was complaining about the racial composition of the school to the students. A member of the board wrote in an email that she was, quote, angry and disappointed at TJ's admissions results and that she expected, quote, intentful, whatever that means, action forthcoming. Intentful. They even put sick next to it to indicate they have no idea why this person chose that word. Perhaps they should have gotten an education and then maybe gotten admitted to TJ. Intentful action forthcoming. That board member also contacted Scott Braybrand, the superintendent of the Fairfax County Public Schools, demanding that the board and the public school system, quote, be explicit in how we're going to address the underrepresentation of Black and Hispanic students. What does that tell you? That's a quote I'm citing. That would be a school board member for Fairfax County declaring out loud, we need to decrease Asian American students and we need to increase Black and Hispanic students. In other words, the students need to be chosen on the basis of their race for the number one high school in the country. And notice what she's not calling for. She's not calling for improving the schools out of which these Black and Hispanic students are coming. That's not what she's calling for. She's calling for meddling with the goalposts at the best school in the country. The board, Alito writes today, answered the call. In December of 2020, it adopted the current admissions policy, which no longer relies on standardized tests. The policy fills around 450 of the 550 seats in each incoming class by allocating a specified number of seats to each public middle school in the qualifying region. The remaining 100 seats are open to the entire applicant pool. Applicants for these seats are evaluated based on their grades, something called a portrait sheet, a problem-solving essay, and experience factors. The portrait sheet is meant to describe the applicant's soft skills, soft in quotes, such as the ability to work with other students. The four experience factors are 1, eligibility for free or reduced price meals, 2, status as an English language learner, 3, eligibility for special education services, and 4, attendance at a public middle school that previously sent few students to TJ. You see what's happening? They're weighting certain schools based on not sending enough students to TJ. The goal, of course, to conceal that they are racially meddling in the numbers. So the board members openly talk about their racism. And then in the actual application process, they try and conceal what they're doing is meddling with the racial composition of the school. Alito and Thomas say today that this new policy did have an immediate effect. The percentage of white, Hispanic, and Black students increased, while the percentage and number of Asian American students sharply dropped. In prior years, the offer rate for Asian Americans had hovered between 65 and 75%. Under the new policy, they received 54% of the offers. In fact, even though the entering class expanded by 64 seats, the number of seats offered to Asian Americans decreased by 56. They say the Coalition for TJ, an organization that includes parents of children who have applied or will apply to TJ, filed suit in federal court against the board. The coalition alleged that the new admissions policy was based on intentional racial discrimination and therefore violates the Equal Protection Clause. After a careful review of the record, the district court agreed. It agreed, they say. And they go on to say that they agree as well. It appears that this is racial discrimination. Now, here's where things get great, even better in this dissent. They say even though they talk about the Fourth Circuit's handling of all this, and they say even though the new policy bore more heavily on Asian American applicants because it diminished their chances of admission while improving the chances of every other racial group, the panel held that there was no disparate impact because they were still overrepresented in the TJ student body. In other words, there's still more Asian students there than there are who are coming out of our middle schools. So therefore, it's totally fine. They're not being discriminated against. Alito writes today that this is a clearly mistaken understanding of what it means for a law or a policy to have a disparate effect on the members of a particular racial or ethnic group. Under the old policy, each Asian American applicant had a certain chance of admission. Under the new policy, that chance has been significantly reduced. While the chance of admission for members of other racial and ethnic groups, it's increased. Accordingly, the new admissions policy bore more heavily on Asian American applicants. Alito and Thomas say this is insane to do this. This is insane. That's not the word they use today, but they come close to calling it that. And they posit a hypothetical. They want you to think about this. They put this to the other justices on the Supreme Court. They said this: consider the following hypothetical. Suppose that white parents in a school district where 85% of the students are white and 15% are Black complain because 10 of the 12 basketball players, 83% on the public high school basketball team, are Black. Suppose that the principal emails the coach and says, quote, "You have too many Black players. You need to replace some of them with white players." And suppose the coach emails back, okay, that will hurt the team, but if you insist, I'll do it. The coach then takes 5 of his black players aside and kicks them off of the team for some contrived but facially neutral reason. For instance, as covered, he might institute a policy that reserves a set number of spots on the roster for each of the middle schools who feed to the high school. According to the reason of the Fourth Circuit majority, this action would not violate equal protection because the percentage of black players left on the team, approximately 42%, well, they would exceed the percentage of black students in the school. Alito says today, I cannot imagine this court sustaining such discrimination. But in principle, there is no difference between that imaginary case and the one that's now before us. And he's right. And isn't it sad that you have to use that example to demonstrate in crystal clear terms that this is racial discrimination?
Perhaps a few of you in the media came here today to see if I'm dropping out of the race. Well, I'm not.
The South Carolina vote this week, that's the Republican primary vote. Donald Trump dominating in that state like all the others. Of course, Nikki Haley from South Carolina. Here's what she said about that.
South Carolina will vote on Saturday. But on Sunday, I'll still be running for president. I'm not going anywhere. I'm campaigning every day until the last person votes because I believe in a better America and a brighter future for our kids. Nothing good in life comes easy.
Yeah, she says that. Although the math doesn't support her, she's not really doing that well, and she is set to lose again in her home state this week. Finally, in terms of Nikki Haley's remarks, she talked about Donald Trump, and then she seemed to legitimize the left's lawfare against him.
It's not normal to spend $50 million in campaign contributions on personal court cases. It's not normal to threaten people who back your opponent. And it's not normal to call on Russia to invade NATO countries. Donald Trump has done all of that.
Well, of course, that last item was Trump calling for those NATO countries to pay what they owe. Joining me now to discuss all of this is Bruce LeVell, a surrogate for former President Donald Trump and perhaps future President Donald Trump. He joins us now. Hello, Bruce.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks, Vince. Thanks for having me.
Were you as curious about what Nikki Haley was up to today as the rest of us were?
No, I'm actually in Georgia now, neighboring state of South Carolina. I actually know the South Carolinians very well, a lot of friends and family and business colleagues and leaders and et cetera. It's desperation. It's kind of sad. I noticed the last comment you were talking about as it relates to wanting Russia to invade NATO countries. Listen, the president is always, even in the administration, I was actually appointed to him for representing the White House and small business, is that pay up. He always likes people to bring, as they call it, skin in the game. You know, what's your skin in the game? You know, does it seem fair that we're footing the bill for a lot of our, quote, neighboring allies, and they're not contributing their fair share? It's always been a campaign way you campaign, but also a, quote, campaign promise. And so it's desperation. It's kind of sad because, you know, she was a two-term governor. They just released a statement today where her own county where she lives is supporting President Trump. Both senators, Tim Scott, Lindsey Graham, the governor, lieutenant governor, most of the entire congressional delegation, as well as the entire state house, as well as the state senate, with the exception of a few, are supporting President Trump. I mean, come on, that's your home state. You can't win your own county. And so I know where it's coming from. It's the promise of that she said, quote, if President Trump would run, if he ran, she would not, quote, run. So that really turned off a lot of people. And really respectfully, you know, let's just be honest, where people agree or disagree, especially the listeners as it relates to 2020, that was not a, quote, normal election. We've never had an election process with, quote, the country shut down and said, oh, don't worry, we'll mail you your envelopes.
No, it was the single most abnormal election of our lifetime. No question.
Exactly. And so had it been a regular, normal playing field, it's the same thing I told Ron. You know, I know Ron really well, and I heard some rumors he was contemplating. I called him up and said, hey, man, what are you doing? He's like, what do you mean? I was like, dude, you would not be there if it wasn't for President Trump intervening in your election to help you get you across the finish line for Andrew Gilliam. So I think what it is, it shows a really disloyalty as it relates to. And a lot of people don't understand when we use that term. If they turn on you like this, what would they do to the voters and the American people? It says a lot about the depth of a person's character when they're working with someone.
Yeah, and look, I look at this race and I think, okay, if somebody wants to run in a Republican primary, they're more than welcome to. But once the voters render a judgment, you should probably take heed of it, especially looking at the scoreboard right now. Nikki Haley does not have a chance even in her own state. But the thing that really bugs me about her remarks today, and she's been doing this for a while, is the idea that she would legitimize the left's weaponization of the criminal justice system against Donald Trump. For her to stand up there today and say, oh, this is a guy who spends more time in a courtroom than he does on the campaign trail, as if that's something that Donald Trump would prefer to be doing, is insane to me.
Yeah, and just let me clarify this because I know a lot about this. The fundraising for the legal is totally separate. The campaign funds do not commingle with that whatsoever. And everyone knows that, there's a lot of strict FEC guidelines as it relates to what you use for campaigns. You also have a lot of, super PACs out there, C4s, as well as campaign funding legal funding is totally separate from campaigning. So she knows that's disingenuous. It's a lie and shouldn't even dare to even try to articulate that to the voters. That's totally different.
On the issue of money, perhaps you can share, Bruce, if you have some good sense of this, but as long as Nikki Haley continues to be a Republican primary opponent, even though she's not gaining meaningful support in that role, does that impede Donald Trump's ability to form a joint fundraising committee with the RNC and to move on in this campaign in a way that he can beat these Democrats more easily? Yeah,
it definitely creates some level of conflict, and I'm sure you saw a lot of changes that are going to go up with Michael Whatley out of North Carolina, the president, saying that he would like to see him as the chair, and as well as my good friend Laura Trump being the co-chair. And listen, I've been a former chairman before years ago in Georgia. It's not uncommon, as we call it, the season. I think respectfully, whether people like it or not, I'm going to put my campaign hat on, former chairman hat on. It's a thing. You don't please everyone. It's a very particular job dealing with, quote, Republican primary candidates as well as elected officials on the ballots across the country. The goal, obviously, is to raise money and fight in the general.
Right.
So, respectfully, as it relates to the quote rules, it is a sticky situation when it comes to that. But, however, the leadership does have with the RNC committee members across the country to vote, say, hey, it's time to reconcile. So they could easily say, hey, let's go ahead and reconcile around President Trump now, and let's just go ahead and get this done. But yes, to your point, as long as someone is in, it does create a level of a slight conflict as it relates to reconciling without having a sole nominee.
Right. So in reality, whether she likes it or not, I mean, she is creating impediments to success in November for Donald Trump.
Yeah. And let me just say this, because I know President very well, is more of a friend than just, quote, Bruce the surrogate. I think, because I've been with him from the beginning. I met him 34 years ago in Atlanta, believe it or not,
Wow.
is that, these individuals that we mentioned on your show, Ron DeSantis, of course, Nikki Haley, a lot of these folks, it would have been so easier to say, listen, being the playing field, you see what's going on and them weaponizing these particular agencies to stop President Trump.
Yeah.
Let's all reconcile, give the man his fair share, as he was, quote, in my eyes, a true incumbent based on what he was dealt with. Agencies that were proven that lied on him. 51 heads of that department said the laptop was Russian disinformation. Quote, caught spying on the campaign. Many obstacles that President Trump had to go through. And I say this is part of the package of not a normal election cycle as it relates to the shutdown.
Yes.
So if they'd have just recognized, look, guys, you're young, you got time, let's get behind here and get this man back over the finish line. If Ron would have done that and just came out and fought the fight song, the very thing that he begged and almost cried. That's a true story, too, by the way. I'm not, when President Trump said he almost cried, asking for that endorsement to get him barely across the finish line with Andrew Gilliam. that right there could have impacted, like, look, let me reciprocate this back to you. If it wasn't for you, me and Casey wouldn't have got here. And then let me at least repay the favor. Let me get Florida behind you. Let me get Congressman Donalds. Let me get the entire Marco Rubio, Senator Tim Scott, the entire delegation behind you. Let's knock this out the park. And then 2028, he would have been the guy to beat. He would have been the champion. He actually would have got wiser and stronger by going 4 more years, finish his second term, and going out and creating more allies as it gets close to 28.
Right,
So
and so he ran, and so unlike Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis saw the writing on the wall. He bowed out of the race. He endorsed Donald Trump. In fact, my understanding is he's speaking in South Carolina this afternoon, I believe, to the state legislature. But what's your impression? Will Ron DeSantis be a presence on the campaign trail in any meaningful way in the days ahead or the months ahead for Donald Trump?
Well, I'm hoping he is for his sake. And, I'm a loyal person. It reflects me as a person. I've been married happily 32 years, February 14th. I have friends from first grade, second grade. I'm very, very loyal. It takes a lot for me to separate from someone. President Trump's the same way. And I think if he could get past the sanctimoniouses and all that. Listen, it's not personal; it's business. That's one thing I can speak for the president on.
He said that name was retired actually a couple weeks ago.
Exactly, and he'll. That's just how he is. He's a fighter. He's like, okay, it's business. Let's put the gloves on. Let's see what's happened after it's over. Let's try to reconcile. And just for the record, if you recall back in 2016, as much as he did low energy Jeb and Little Marco and all the other names.
Lion Ted. Yeah.
Yeah, he literally, if you saw, he's like, okay, guys, let's get together. And he tried to pull, as I call it, pull the olive branch out there by giving some of these folks some of these positions, like Nikki, ambassador, and some other folks that even the base were kind of shifty-eyed with. You see what I'm saying? So you can't accuse him holding things personal. And I know the left has been trying to say, oh, he's going to come back and, retribution. He's going to come back and retaliate and all that and blah, blah, blah. And I would, I do 2 or 3 media hits every other day. And I said, no, that's not how he operates. Right is right, wrong is wrong.
No, the whole idea that he's going to be some sort of dictator, as if we never actually experienced him as president in the first place. Remember on the campaign trail in 2016, we heard chants of lock her up. Donald, how's Hillary's prison sentence doing right now? Would you say, Bruce LeVell?
Exactly. Well, that's my point there. So we know what we're dealing with. I think respectfully back to Nikki and a lot of these people. But I did say this, Vince, real quick, and for your listeners. Way back in October, a lot of us as our leadership, we've come to the conclusion that this is going to be the season of exposure. And it's a spiritual thing for me because it's deeper as it relates to another conversation why we're supporting President Trump. But, there's a lot of things that are going to come to light. There's a lot of people that you're going to least expect, that are going to come out. But there's also some things that have been looming, in the darkness for so long that are coming to light. And respectfully, with this great nation that we have for decades and decades, the American people, we've kind of took our eye off what we were supposed to be keeping an eye on. Mm-hmm. Where both sides were guilty of pay to play, and look what it's grown to. So coming in and saying, I'm going to not entertain pay to play, and encouraging other great people, especially some of your listeners on here, they're great business people that listen. We want you to come serve city council. We want you to be on the school board. We want you to be that state court judge. If you've done a great job with your law firm, come serve a term or 2, then go encourage other good people. Because this is what happens when you have Doc Holliday, I call Doc from Back to the Future judge up there in New York that ruled this judgment. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to remember, you want to encourage good people to serve on these magistrate court seats, these solicitors seats. And my God, look what I'm dealing with down here at Fulton County with Fonnie Willis. Another prime example. Look at Letitia James, Alvin Bragg. Look at the depth of these people that got in office and to manipulate the law to make it the way they want it to stick and come up with these indictments. This could be anyone. Imagine that. So this is why it's critical. When people say, how can I help? I say, you're going to have to step up and serve. The problem with this, Vince, with this ruling that's coming down, what President Trump's going through, a lot of New Yorkers have business colleagues up there all over Manhattan and the boroughs and Brooklyn and Flushing, New York, et cetera. What does that say to the good, solid business people that you want to run, that you want to encourage them to run for commission or run for city council or run for the mayor's seat? They're going to I don't know if I want to do that. My political adversaries might get mad at me and go dig up my closing documents from 12 years ago.
Right.
So this is some very serious business going on right now. This is dangerous. I just got the numbers on the boroughs as it relates to Class A office. A lot of those buildings are 30% vacant. There's $2.7 trillion of notes being carried right now by U.S. banks right now, where the debt service is about to change because this year is where a lot of these notes are coming due that were at 3.25%. They're about to be 8%. With a 30-40% occupancy in these buildings. They can't sustain their debt service.
No.
So there's a lot of doom and gloom as it relates to the numbers because of the consumer confidence. I just watched Fox Business a minute ago, and they're talking about the numbers. I always like numbers. And the consumer confidence is slipping, and that generates the economy. But if you see migrants getting preferential treatment, you're seeing Black Americans, been here for hundreds of years. I talked about this morning on Newsmax. It says they're seeing other illegal migrants coming over here and getting hotels, EBT vouchers, places in Chicago to go to school and putting other children out and say, you go on your laptop. This is some very serious stuff. You see the Mayor Adams. We warned him and said, look, you don't have to accept this silliness. You don't have to do this. But he bowed down into it. He became more of a sanctuary city. He allowed all these migrants to come in. He turned a blind eye, and now the city's getting away from it.
They're bending over backwards for foreign nationals and not for our own people. Yeah.
People are literally saying, maybe I should look at doing business in another state. Case in point, autonomous zones. They allowed that silliness to go down and Portland.
Yep.
They allowed it to go on in Seattle. Go back, Vince, if you guys got the infrastructure, go back and look at where are these businesses now that were in the quote autonomous zones. They're still blighted, sir.
Yep.
I know that for a fact. They all moved. Some of them from Seattle moved to Nevada.
Well, that's what happens.
A whole block.
That's what happens when a warlord takes over your neighborhood, which is what happened there in those autonomous zones.
Exactly.
Literally, people carrying weapons around, scaring the customers all away. It was crazy.
Yeah, this is a critical state of our country. For those of the folks that have children and grandkids, ladies and gentlemen, you've got to get involved. You've got to get out there and participate in your local elections. That's where the grassroots starts. Zuckerberg
totally right.
saw that. That's why he dumped $400+ million in CTE, which is a third-party group that went in and prioritized ballot boxing across 4 of the major counties here in Georgia. I mean, these guys are slick down on the game. That's why it's all grassroots.
Well,
local elections are very critical.
You're totally right. An inspirational conversation in addition to a newsworthy one. Bruce LeVell, thank you very much. Good to talk to you today, sir, representing the Trump campaign, a friend of Trump for many years. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Good to